and slept. Cool. Thank you.
And it goes without saying that this is another session part of the FIDO network and greater than collectives uh, networks festival. So welcome folks who've been attending other events, and also folks who I see some familiar faces from last week's session around decision making too. So welcome again to Susan and I as we try to jam as much as possible into 90 minutes. And to that end, we're going to dive into Ecocycle head first. But to do that, let's make sure that we can all orient in the Miro board that we're going to be playing in. So you'll see in chat there um, a link to the Miro. Just want to let everyone get in there first. And I'm going to take a very stepwise approach into this diagram, which could be new for some of you. Just out of curiosity, is anyone familiar with Ecocycle here? Anyone heard this before? Raise your hand or make a sound or something if you have. Okay.
It looks like we've got some curious newbies, which is exciting.
Yeah, that is really exciting. Um, okay, so let's and who's unfamiliar with Miro? Are there folks who've like, oh, okay, yeah, all right, cool. So I'm gonna do just a very brief little screen share here to help orient us. Um, you're going to see some wizard behind the curtain stuff. This is our session lab here. This is what we use to structure our process here. Okay, so here we are in the Miro space. We've got a fairly big board today because there's quite a bit of different things we're going to look at. But we're going to not talk a lot about it. We're going to try to have you in your um, in your little group configurations and on your own making sense of this stuff. So a few things to note. You'll see all of these cursors zooming around. These are different participants. And I think you can turn those off, Susan, if I'm correct, up at the top here.
Uh,
So you go here and see where I've clicked. Up here, I've clicked the little arrow next to my name. You can click show cursors right here, and then it turns all of that off if you don't want to see all of the murmurating pointers in the page. I kind of like to see them sometimes though, because it is kind of like a murmuration. So I leave mine on. So that's something to note. If you're on a trackpad, you can zoom in by kind of spreading your fingers out like that and zoom out by pinching. If you don't have that, on the bottom right, there's a little plus and a minus here, which you can use to zoom in and out. And if you aren't on a desktop or a tablet, or you're on your phone or something like this, you don't want to be in the Miro space, that's okay too. If you have a pen and pencil, you can just be jotting down some notes and ideas as we go.
mm.
Um,
Or just draw the
and
eco cycle yourself. It's pretty
yeah,
easy to
and
draw an
and
H.
draw the
Yeah.
it's an infinity symbol.
Yeah.
And when we get to that part, you can draw it on your own. So that is Miro in a nutshell. And we've already loaded every space here with our stickies that we're going to be working with. Susan, I'm wondering if, as I go through this, if you could lock just the frames, not the whole content in them,
Yeah.
but just to keep them from moving. And I'll lock this one here too, because I realized we're still we're still privy to some
Yeah.
movement
I'm
there.
not sure I have locking permission stuff. Sorry.
Okay, that might have to be me. That's right. It's my board. Okay. So that is our Miro space. And while you folks are doing this first step here, um, I'll go in there and lock things. Okay, so rather than explain everything to you up front, we're gonna do it as we come to it. But what I will say off the top is that EcoCycle It's a liberating structure. So it's from this library of participatory methods. Susan and I, in the fall, we teach a class on that whole library, or as much of it as we can cover, where you can come and experience it and practice together over about 5 or 6 sessions. So I highly recommend joining that. We'll put a link for that at the end. Um, Ecocycle is one of those structures that works really well with a group that has a shared context, which isn't us today. So this is why you see so many on the board right now, because you're each going to be doing your own ecocycle just for you. We're not going to be worrying about doing a collective one here. And this is to just help you get a taste of what the different pieces of the diagram mean and how you can use them. And I'll share a link at the end as well too to the liberating structure webpage. For now, though, Susan, if you can generate breakout groups of 3, looks like you've already done that. Thank you so much. We're going to have breakout groups of 3. And you should see when you're in breakout, it'll say room 1, room 2, da 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 da. Just go to that room in the Miro, and it goes in clockwise fashion here. So share my screen once more to show folks where to navigate to. So here's room 1, for instance. So if you're in a trio in room 1, go to that space. And what you're going to do is in your group of 3, you're going to pick a little board that you're going to be playing in, put your name on it, and you're going to be using these stickies. So another lesson in Miro, you just double click the sticky and then you can type into it. And I'll give you an invitation for what you're typing into those stickies when you're in your breakout groups. Right here in chat. And this chat will follow you in to your breakout groups. But the invitation here is really, really simple. We're not going to worry about the diagram yet. You're just going to pick a little workspace when you're in your breakout group that you individually want to work in. You're in that breakout group more just as a group of peers to just help do your own work. Almost imagine it as if you're just co-working in that space together. Of course, you can say hello and all of this, but really you're just doing your own work. And on each of those stickies, write all the activities and or initiatives that currently occupy your time in your work and or life. And I said, don't worry about placement yet. So keeping that invitation really broad, like what's occupying your time? What are you engaged in right now? Pop those onto the stickies
You give
when
some
you're in your
examples, maybe, Steph, just for clarity.
yeah. So for instance, right now in my personal life, we're putting in a garden. So getting the potato, we're putting potatoes into some sacks that we got from a local coffee shop, one of those burlap sacks. So we're filling these burlap sacks with soil and planting potatoes in them. That's like an initiative that's currently occupying my time. But then in work, also working on landing pages for different offers, working on a proposal for a client, things like that. So just anything like that, you write on these stickies and just generate as many as you like. Does that make sense to everyone?
How long, Steph?
What does it say in our session lab? I think just 5 minutes. You're just
Good.
writing on stickies what you're up to, what activities and initiatives are currently occupying your time,
Beautiful.
and orient to the space in the Miro that your group number is. So room 1, room 2, so on and so forth.
It's really weird. It's not giving me a time stamp on the breakout room. So anyway, I don't know what's going to come up on the timestamp, but it's going to be 5 minutes. All right.
See you soon.
See you. Bye.
Uh, okay.
Welcome back,
Folks
everyone.
coming back. Welcome. Okay. So I saw some of you in there
Can you zoom in
adding.
a little bit more? Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Stefan.
Yeah, there
Yeah,
we go.
cool.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna go quickly and do a light touch version of this. I've got my little timer here. The eco cycle, my friends, is where you're going to be placing your stickies after I tell you what some of these parts of it mean. And you see some of that too on each one. So when you're back in your breakouts, each individually, you're going to be placing your things on the eco cycle just to kind of get familiar with it, right? So you can see here that we have I like to start with birth, right? Oh geez, that's so look at how full that line was. My gosh. Let's use the pen. Okay. Birth. This is the beginning of an initiative, right? This is the start of something. It's we've got a little seed here uh that is growing. Something's happening. And then as you can notice, there's a little arrow here that's taking this seed and eventually turning it into a mature tree. So a mature system, think of a forest, right? You've got big, tall, healthy trees. The environment is quite stable. There's not a lot of change happening. Um, and there's something that can kind of dependably provide value. So in my yard, I've got some apple trees. Those are large fruit bearing trees. Every season, we can depend on apples coming from them, right? But then we enter into this space of, and I'm going to hold off on these traps for a minute here. We move from maturity into a space of creative destruction, where suddenly maybe a forest fire has moved through our lovely forest stand, and everything is dramatically transforming. It's no longer what it was. We certainly can't depend on apples from that apple tree anymore, and the system is actively being transformed and reworked. So you can see here something we are actively changing or rethinking is dot 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 as a open sentence prompt to think of that, right? In your life. Gestation. So we come back from creative destruction. The forest ecosystem actually responds really well to fire. All of these new plantings emerge. Um, and now there might be a lot more understory growing. There's a lot of berry bushes. There's a lot of maybe some new tree species that didn't used to live in that forest before have moved in. Maybe the climate has changed a bit, right, to enable that to happen. But nothing's fully established yet. Everything is getting gestated. It's little seedlings, many different options that could all emerge into the new thing that's getting born. But we're not there yet until we're truly back in this path of birth again, where things are really establishing themselves and beginning to grow again. And so this cycle uh, repeats. So that is the basic idea behind the eco cycle here. I'm just gonna look, I did it, Susan. Boom. Would you add anything, Susan? Do you want to add any other little tidbits?
No, I think you did a really great job. And I personally love the eco cycle for the metaphor effect of it, because everybody can kind of relate to what you just described in terms of how the flow of our ideas and our initiatives work through life. And, we have that modeled for us every day in nature.
Darn straight. Yes. And there's a whole literature behind all of this. We're just showing you the kind of uh, starting step here to begin to think in this way, right? These different phases. So now what you're going to do is we're going to send you back into breakouts, and you're going to, with that diagram in mind and with what I've just shared in mind, you're going to place your stickies onto the ecocycle in spaces that make sense for you, you know? So for me, my potato sacks, those are definitely in the space of birth right now. They're planted, they they're actually seeding right now. The landing page, we're going to share a landing page at the end of the session with you for a cool summer school idea that Susan and I have. That is also in the birthplace. It's just a little seed that's planted and it's now moving. Greater than as a whole, however, is definitely in the maturity space. Lots of connection, lots of things already established and happening there, for example, right? So take that same lens to the items that you've generated on your stickies and just begin to move them over into the ecocycle that you've identified as yours, and just begin getting a feel for what this diagram means to you. Okay, so we'll see you all in about let's give folks maybe 7 minutes to kind of orient and help each other out if you're feeling stuck, but mostly work alone.
Great. And Kalia would like the link for the Miro board again.
Yes,
And Kalia, I'll
absolutely.
make sure that you are also in a room. Nice one. Okay. See you guys soon.
Let me get the Miro up here.
Okay.
Sorry, it just takes a quick second here. All the slow things on the internet, even though it's so amazingly fast. Okay, there we go.
Okay. Bye.
Uh,
Okay.
So stickies are being moved over but disappearing, I hear. So let me take a look here.
Mm.
Uh,
I think you lock the board, and if I move the sticky notes, they disappear behind the Ecocycle
Thank
picture.
you. Yes,
Might
I will
be more
fix
people
that
having
right
this
away.
problem.
Yeah. Uh,
How do I find back into my? But there's nobody in my breakout room. It doesn't really matter. Um, oh, they should be here.
there we go. Okay. Oh gosh. Like so far.
Mhm.
Oh, Eugen's back.
Hello. Hmm.
Hello. Oh, and now everyone. Also, hi, Hugo. Nice to see you here. Um, all right. So just very brief, just a few peppered voices. What's this like so far? Is this beginning to kind of make sense, this little diagram? We're gonna keep kind of gently coming stepwise into what it is. Anything clicking yet for people, or is something confusing? What's going on? Catherine.
Hi there. I love your eco cycle, but I'm not quite sure how any of my activities fit on it.
Uh,
Because a lot of my activities are kind of ephemeral. And so,
mm,
like mowing the lawn or reading a book or they're not time bound, they're not things that I want to stop doing or start doing or, stop doing or start doing.
hmm.
So I really struggled with knowing where to place mine, to be honest. They didn't seem to have a place.
I love it.
Like
Well,
buying
that's
groceries, like where would that fit? Attending Pilates class,
it's great.
ordering supplements.
Others, any other like, oh, this was huh? Or like, oh, this was huh?
Go again?
Eugen?
I felt like I was not sure whether I put some things on the birth or the creative destruction, because I felt like, yes, things are changing, but when things are changing, isn't that something new is born? So I don't know, I felt like I
Yeah.
could put it there or put it in between or whatever. It felt like, okay, these are the two I had like most problems
Yeah.
with.
So like what's the best spot for this? Yeah.
Mm.
Cool. Any other thoughts or comments?
I felt
Yeah.
like between birth and maturity, there should be something else. Like I
Ah,
felt like, okay,
ah,
it's somewhere in between. That's what I thought a lot.
mm, a missing middle somewhere in there. Yeah, no, I love this. This is common, all of these. Um, and rather than get into education mode, I'm going to keep us in practice mode. There is no right answer for this, especially with your own work that you're doing here. And even also when you're doing it with a large group of people, because you'll often have people place a thing over here and a thing over there, and they're like, "What? I don't agree with that." And then that's actually really important, is that disagreement space between people in a group about a shared ecocycle. Um, but yeah, I'll say some more near the end on Catherine and Marin, the missing middle piece. And right now, I'm gonna go a little bit deeper into this now and talk about the traps. And then we're gonna send you into breakouts where you can all discuss where you feel maybe a little stuck in your work, um, or life, as the case may be. So let me just get that image up again, especially for the sake of the recording. So I'm going to go into the big middle one here, time myself very briefly here. There are actually 4 traps to be aware of in an ecocycle. I'll start with the most commonly known ones, the scarcity trap or the poverty trap. So this is basically, there's too many things. When you're gestating, when you're starting a garden, you've got a lot of plant starts going in a garden example, for instance, right? But also, like, if you're networking, you're trying to pursue new business ideas, things like that, there's sometimes a lot. And really, each of these traps is a bit of a decision that we have to be making for ourselves or collectively. And for the scarcity or the poverty trap, that decision is, what will we invest in? Which is another way of saying, what are we going to not do? What are we going to not invest in and decide to set aside? So that's the scarcity trap. And you can see why it comes here right after gestation and before birth, because we can't really truly make something come about unless we decide to kind of make room for it in the garden. Now, the rigidity trap. So this is the other very common one, which is why it's included in this diagram here. This is when we go from a space of maturity and conditions are changing so much so that we actually have to let go of whatever it is was mature, and we have to let it move into that space of creative destruction. And so here the decision is, what will we stop doing? And you can see some examples here for each of these traps to help wrap your head around what the meaning of these spaces are. So what are we going to let go of? What are we going to stop doing? Coming back around to this birth space, there's this less commonly known isolation trap. And then near this maturity space, there's this less commonly known eroding trap. And these are interesting ones to think through as well. Isolation is basically realizing that you are kind of out on a limb with something, that you're actually not fully integrating it into where it needs to be or where it's going to have the best benefit and support. So the question here and the decision here is, where are we bridging or aligning with others, right? And there's some examples of what happens when we get stuck in that trap. In the eroding trap, we have maybe a system that's actually quite mature and established, but it's slowly kind of losing something. It's not necessarily falling apart yet, but people aren't as engaged anymore as they used to be. Something like this, right? And here we need to ask ourselves, okay, where do we need to be regenerating? Where do we need to be recognizing some red flags in our system so that we don't kind of sleepwalk into a situation where we're suddenly having to let go. We're suddenly moving into creative destruction without realizing that we're there. So that is the eroding trap. So these trap spaces we put in the middle here, and we're going to come back around to them when we talk about Cynefin in a bit here and begin to orient around that. But before we do go there, we're going to send you back into your breakouts to have just a conversation together, get to know each other a little bit more here. And yeah, share, where are you trapped? Where are you currently a bit stuck in your work or in your life? What's going on with that? And feel free to adopt a listening posture with your peers as you're in breakout there. You don't have to solve anything and everything for each other. This is more just to share, okay, I'm making sense of these ideas in these ways, and these might be some places where I have to figure something out, or I need to jiggle something loose, or whatever it might be. Now, Susan, we'll send folks in for, what do you think, about 6 or 7?
Yep, sounds good. And
Okay.
again, right, and maybe even what that trap feels like in your body, even if it's not clear on the ecocycle. Does it feel like rigidity? Does it feel like scarcity? Does it feel like things are drifting? What does it feel like?
Yeah.
Have fun. We'll see you in about 7. Bye. It's nice to see some smiles.
Now, especially after discussion about being trapped. the trapping, the trapping dynamic and the stuck dynamic. Yeah, and nice that you were able to kind of make sense of this in a stepwise fashion, I hope. It can feel like a lot. And we're just scratching the surface. So what I'll pop into the chat here, Susan is going to take over and do us some Cynefin, and I'm just going to pop into chat the liberating structure and encourage you to go and look at Ecocycle some more. And we're going to keep thinking about it right now. Over to you, Susan.
Thanks, Steph. Maybe we can just take a couple breaths together, just to a lot of jumping around this morning, or well, this morning for me, this evening probably for the rest of you. I'm in Aotearoa in Wellington, New Zealand, and it's now 6:30 a.m. So yeah, it's hard to match these energies, but let's go for it. Uh, who can I just get a little show of hands? Who is familiar with, has played with Cynefin or complexity theory generally? Okay, cool. So a few more here. So I appreciate that this might be completely new to some people. And what I really appreciate Jennifer Garvey Berger's explanation of Cynefin and how the challenge for leaders or humans generally to make sense of what's happening in a particular initiative in a particular situation um, in a way that can start to help us, like I said in the opening, better discern the next action. And this, again, after we watch this, we're going to think about it a little bit in regards to the traps and how thinking from this perspective might give us some clues as how to step our way out of these traps. So just give me a second here. I'm going to play the video. It's short, it's only 4 minutes. And like I said, I feel like she always does a much better job than I do.
Just imagine that Susan is wheeling a AV cart up and putting a
right? Yeah,
VHS into the.
exactly. Here we go.
So over time, leaders develop patterns and habits in the way we approach things.
Oh, the volume is
And
quite low.
often those patterns and habits have worked really well for us in the past. And the problem with them is that we get so used to them that we can forget what the situation calls for and just rely on our own habits. And that's why Dave Snowden's Cynefin framework is really helpful, both for us to use to think about ourselves and to use to think about how do we address things with teams. Snowden's framework makes the big distinction between those things which are predictable and those things which are unpredictable. In the predictable world, you can expect things to repeat time after time. They just cycle around. In the unpredictable world, though, things are really different. They don't necessarily happen again in the way they've happened before. He further then separates the predictable world into two different categories. The things that are obvious are those things that everybody agrees. The connection between cause and effect is so tight, it's so apparent, it's so clear that there's best practice around that stuff. It's well researched. So those are the things like, say, there's a recipe for it almost. Like you bake a cake one time, you know how it's going to come out. You bake it again, it's going to come out the same way if you use the same ingredients and the same recipe. And in the obvious space, you should be able to get things that repeat predictably time after time using best practices and recipes, checklists, things like that. In the complicated space, which is the other domain Snowden talks about in the predictable world, in the complicated space, it's different. There is a connection between cause and effect, but it's kind of fuzzy, and you need experts to figure it out. So things repeat over time, but you need a lot of experience or domain expertise to know which approach to take. This isn't the place where we'd have best practice, because experts might disagree about these things. This is the place we'd have good practice, where solid experts with really good research or experience would say, I think you should go this way. Another expert might say, I think you should go this other way. But in general, they're going in the same direction. Things like really hard things that have lots of moving parts can be in this category. Things like bringing a person to the moon, making a rocket ship go to the moon. That lives in this domain, in fact. So you get engineers and scientists and people in charge of rockets and fuel, and all those folks each work together on their own piece. You put it together and you have a machine that will take you someplace wonderful. When you cross over into the unpredictable domain, actually the rules all change, and how we act as leaders also needs to change. Over here, you can't tell what's going to happen next simply because it's happened before. You need to come up with new approaches, novel approaches, safe-to-fail experiments to figure out how to nudge the system in a new direction. People say parenting isn't rocket science, but actually rocket science is in the complicated domain. Parenting is in the complex domain. Leading people is in the complex domain. Culture change is in the complex domain. These are things that just because they happened one way once, you can't count on them happening that way again. Then Snowden offers us the chaotic domain. And in chaos, there's no connection between cause and effect. We just can't make out the patterns. There, a leader's job is to stabilize the system and see if over time patterns can emerge. We experiment our way, safe-to-fail experiments in the complex space, and then eventually some things will become predictable and repeatable over time. You can move them across the Cynefin map into the complicated space, and then maybe even some of those things become obvious over time. And in that way, as leaders use the whole of the Cynefin map, they can fit their style and their problem-solving approach to the actual conditions at hand instead of relying on our habits, which might take us really well in one area and not so well in another area.
Right. So yes, we will share the link to the video, Stefan, as well, I promise. Yeah, I really love the way that she so clearly explains and describes these categories. And if I think about what was shared in the scenario of mowing lawn or grocery shopping, these things probably fit into the simple category, right? Because there are things that just repeat time and time after time. You figure out your best way to do it, and it just keeps on going. Another thing that could be, for example, in some of your eco cycles could be, I feel stuck because I can never get my act together when it comes to a scheduling tool. And thinking about that potentially in the simple domain where there are some some good ideas, there's good products out there. I just need to test them and then decide on it. Could be a really interesting way to think about how that would fit in the simple domain in the Cynefin framework. Something that might fit into the 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 complicated space could be building a website, right? So you've decided that you really finally, after all this time, want to build your personal website. There are good tools out there, but there are different kinds of tools. And for example, you might feel really confident at writing the content, but you might not feel so confident in, well, how do I manage my SEO? How do I ensure that I get my analytics set up correctly? And so in that case, you might want to get the advice of an expert. You might get the advice of two or three experts who might have different ways of thinking about it. But when things are complicated with a lot of moving pieces, looking at it from the perspective of who knows better than I do, and how can they help me sort this thing out. At the end of the day, you're going to get something that's repeatable and is going to do the same thing over and over again, like the rocket ship, hopefully. But in order to unblock it, you're going to need to get some expertise on it. Of course, anything that involves another human being in addition to yourself almost always falls into the complex domain, right? Because just because you feel one way about something is no guarantee that the other person is going to. And that's like the simplest way I can describe and explain the complex domain. Like just because something happened one time is no guarantee that it will happen again the same time. Let's take this session, for example. The humans, I think we had 75 people sign up. 26 of the humans that signed up made their way here. But if there had been any other different combination of people, what would have happened in this session would have been profoundly different. And so thinking about how we solve problems, how we move things forward when we don't know what's going to happen. As Jennifer was saying, what are some hypotheses that we can make, and how can we design in a way that we're amplifying the things that we want, even though we know that they might not actually happen, and not be so necessarily attached to codifying. Because for me, this is the biggest one of the biggest challenges that we have in the world today is this rational rush to codify. You think you've done enough, you've got it down on paper, it works this way, so let's codify it and try to make it work, squish everything we do into this particular container. And then get surprised, upset, disillusioned when, because you've got for example, a different group of people doing the same thing, it doesn't work the same way. Like, how can we start to learn to be comfortable in that space of complexity and kind of embrace it for what it is, which is the place of innovation, growth, change, challenge, surprise, curiosity. So with that, I would love for us to, Elizabeth.
Hi, Susan. I would just really love your advice. I feel like I've been operating in a space that's taught me to embrace complexity, but typically working in much larger organizations that don't like to embrace that, and it's viewed almost as a failure of my work. because I can't do that codification. And I would love to sort of hear you unpack a little how you might approach that challenge. Thank you so much.
Yeah, pleasure. Um, yeah, I wasn't expected to give advice, but I will. My approach in this particular situation, and Steph, please do jump in here as well, would be to organize your work around safe to fail experiments and articulate your work as experiments. Articulate your work as I've got a hunch that we're going to see this if we try this. I'm going to include whoever wants to be included in the process. I'm going to have a very tight feedback cycle. I am going to ask the people who have a stake in the game to come and help us look at the data that we have and make sense of it together. For me, that's one of the biggest issues is we hardly, in any kind of organization, we can take the same data set and all interpret it and look at it in different ways. And I think that maybe if you could create the condition or the opportunity where you could just gather some people together and do a sense making activity, it sounds like even in your context, using the words like sense making probably isn't going to fly. But okay, let's look at this data together and see if we even cohere on the meaning. And that could be a nice, easy, gentleish way to help the people who you're accountable for to kind of maybe even have that light bulb moment. Like, okay, we don't have enough information yet to know if this is the right way to go. What's another experiment that we can try to see if our hunch is right, for example?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, so let's move into, I don't know, do we want to call this
Well,
an advice lab
Susan,
or
I was
but
saying
yeah, doing this
I was saying
way.
we're already in it.
Yeah, we
We're already
are.
in it. Elizabeth brought in something that was stuck. And rather than do all the things with the video stuff, I'm just gonna spotlight folks. So
Sounds good.
I'll spotlight you and me and Elizabeth for now, and then whoever else wants to go, just raise your hand. But what I'm gonna do, oh, I can't seem to spotlight Elizabeth. Are you able to spotlight
I
Elizabeth?
think probably because their video is off, it's not possible.
Oh, right. Okay.
I'm having some tech issues. I'm sorry. So I'm on my computer and my phone. So I'm very confusing for you.
Yeah, it's
All
all good.
good. We so in a fishbowl, basically, yeah, we can give advice, but we can also get advice from others because it's about our shared experience, right? And we all have shared experience in navigating these sticking points that we have. Um, and so yeah, what else is going on in that for you? What's the good, bad, ugly, and lovely is a question that fishbowls sometimes use. So what's the good, bad, ugly, and lovely of getting unstuck? And how might Cynefin help as a compass for you? And so Elizabeth, that
Yep.
yours was great,
Yeah,
and
Zemek's
Susan,
here.
your answer was great.
Yeah,
Oh yeah,
Zemek.
let's
Yeah, bring them
spotlight.
in.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, welcome to the fishbowl. We have a couple more seats up here too, if others want to join too.
That was great, really helpful. A lot of information actually to think about from such a great diagram and exercise. It's something that I was actually excited to use for something I'm doing, and I'm working with particularly stuck structures of linear science. So how we do science in the past 400 years, starting with Descartes, trying to change how that's done into a more relational, applied science perspective to solve some wicked problems related to ecosystem restoration that hopefully will then. And so trying to kind of use frameworks that can liberate scientists from the very specific ways of doing things And many scientists are changing. And this is part of that regenerative process which I'll talk about. So many different disciplines. And maybe ways of looking at this that I might not be seeing, how the cycle could be applied in the context of I'm writing some grants with scientists in various academic and research institutions of how to go about this process that is not going to be too confrontational, make them feel invited, make them feel welcome, because it for some people it might be a huge way of rethinking things and might result in them being this is crazy, what are you doing?
This is
So I'm trying
such
how to
yeah.
lead them into this.
This is so great. Like I like the first thing that came up when you were sharing is when I was doing my, I guess my education or my learning around Cynefin. I was always surprised at how many engineers showed up on the courses. Like, oh, okay, I thought this was just for weird hippies like me. But it was really a way for engineers to be able to explain what they couldn't explain, right? Very linear thinking, very, if we do this in this condition, this should happen, as a way for them to kind of like almost like see their shoulders slump and their bodies relax when they're like, oh, it's complex. That's why. So that's one thing that came up. Then what comes up in the ecocycle in I guess in the scientific, in the medical field, et cetera, there are many examples historically of beliefs that were once held and that provided either leverage or certainty or became like the cornerstone of some beliefs, eventually were overtaken by new knowledge or new research. And having them go through that ecocycle from maturity into creating the compost or the like rich soil for the new thing that was being born. I think that kind of organic relational understanding for some, I think, could be very liberating. But I also get your point of how do you do that in a way that feels liberatory and invitational and not like, oh, you're fucking wrong. It's really hard. Steph, what comes up for you in this?
Yeah, well, so I'm using the diagrams that we have as well, and I encourage participants to as well. So we're just in the middle of the diagram, and I created a bunch of copies of probe, sense, respond, sense, analyze, respond in the Cynefin diagram below the ecocycle one. And if you like, you don't have to, but you can drag it up into the space above. And I've placed this one here, this liberates scientists from specific ways of doing things. Out of hunch, you could correct me if I'm wrong, um, it feels in the isolation trap somewhat, only because so much of what I experience when I'm working in academic spaces is that there's this richness of research depth and inquiry, and then in the bridging out from that space, and I have this in my practice too. I have the same challenge with bridging out. There's something in that. So it's like maybe probe, sense, respond. The response that we take to complex systems is important there. So like in what little ways could you probe with little experiments about what to try and then make sense of it with that group of scientists and maybe other stakeholders as well. And then the hard part I always have is the respond part. So then like this is why I get in the isolation trap, because I'm like probe sense, and then I lose sight of the respond part. So encourage you to lean into that space
Mm,
of responding to. But maybe that's just a message for me. But
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I think the curiosity is the thing, right? Even the previous advice around we've got this data here. Do we ever really sit around and each talk about what we think this means? Um, because I can almost guarantee you that there's going to be either different interpretations. One person is going to amplify something more than somebody else does. one person is going to identify something that nobody else thought about. And really getting into this mindset that nobody can see everything. Together we can see more. But then the next step is also something that can be considered from all of those perspectives. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I love it.
Maren, join us.
We have 5 more minutes in Fishbowl here, so just raise your hand and I'll spotlight you and add you into the mix.
Cynefin and other people who think that complexity is systems thinking and whatever. But one thing which I've found quite useful to try and get my head around it is the difference between human complexity and other types of complexity. And I think in organizations that I've worked in, a lot of the time people see complexity as they're thinking about, we need to take complexity and try and simplify it. And the complexity theorists say, well, of course you can't simplify complexity. But you can simplify processes and tasks. And I think that's what people are thinking about a lot when they say we want to make complex things simpler. And so a lot of the time it's when people want to do things in a very structured and linear way, it's because they're trying to simplify the processes which they can transfer across, different locations and make things consistent and whatever. But actually people are open to the idea, sometimes open to the idea that humans are always complex. Humans are not clear or complicated or complex or chaotic. Humans are always complex. So you can kind of separate the two. Sometimes that helps to understand, okay, we can simplify the processes and the tasks. The people side of things, we always have to have an eye on complexity. And obviously, the more interdependence, the more complex that becomes, the more uncertain that becomes, and the more you need to keep an eye on it and sense make and all the rest of it.
I love that. It just stuck in me when we were talking about system and complexity theory purists. Doesn't that kind of negate the actual phrase? It's hilarious. But anyway, thanks, Lucian. That was really great. Could you have one quick example then, maybe, of a complex process as opposed to complex relational field?
Also, I think the sort of process examples that tend to come up with Cynefin and stuff tend to be sort of, either, so I'm building a row of houses and I want every house to be the same and my plan is replicated, and that's pretty clear. And then complicated may be, I don't know, sort of, when you start to get into, okay, there are more bits at play here, and those bits might be moving or changing, logistics or whatever. We're sending this stuff to different countries. It starts to get more complicated. I don't know, and then the people side of it is, it just comes down to the simplest thing. You don't know how I'm going to react if something happens to me as I'm walking to the shop. Seems pretty simple, but as a human, you never know. I can get in the car and drive somewhere, and a bird can fly in front of the car, and I might react very differently to someone else, which makes me put my foot on my brake, which suddenly creates a pile up, which suddenly causes something, vans to be something, people don't get their post, and whatever. I mean, it's unlikely, but humans are always unpredictable to a degree, and so there's always a level of complexity in there.
Beautiful.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, so that was a great, I guess, segue into our closing. I said at the beginning, if this little taster session could just be about how we start to discern and determine what quadrant, for example, our activities, needs, stuckness, whatever it might be in. How can we start to spend more time together to really deepen into the practice so that we might have both more confidence and more tools to be able to apply it in our frustrating life or work circumstances? So I'll hand it off to Steph to close us up.
Yeah, no, thanks. That's a great lead into a goodbye, but an excited goodbye. This is Susan and I probing and seeing, oh, does this little offer make sense for folks? We thoroughly enjoy exploring these ideas, but not just the ideas, experiencing the practices together with large groups of folks, which is what we do in the Liberating Structures Studio. We'll release dates for that soon. I can share the landing page for that momentarily. But in the meantime, we wanted to get everyone's attention and invite you over to that Ticket Tailor page. And also, just because you came today and took a chance on this crazy hunch of a session, we wanted to give participants a discount code to be able to join us in this summer school class. So the discount code is NFSS, and that gets 50 euros off. We're trying to keep this experience very affordable for folks so that we can get as many participants as possible. And I think the best way that I would put it is come and hang out with us in these three, what I consider to be extremely important structures for thinking and practicing with complexity. So we've got critical uncertainties, which is a lovely way to develop like almost I would call it rapid and adaptive strategy in changing environments. And it's a tool that can work with groups of any size. We've got the panarchy, which is the eco-cycle, but now we're nesting it into systems that have different scales, different leverage points, so beginning to think about how our work plugs into entire domains. And then we have Cynefin, which we'll focus on in the third session. So we're calling this a summer school because it's going to take place over the summer. And the idea here is that it's like this is a place to recalibrate your lens before autumn gets busy, So come in, hang out in summer school with us. Every 2 weeks, we'll have a 2-hour session, and there's optional office hours for folks to join and jam on things. And most importantly, to experience and to practice how to use these methods and these mindsets in your own context. So bring your own challenges that you're working with, and come with us on this lovely journey. Yeah, or winter. I don't have to be a hemispherist. You're right. Thank you, Sue. Winter school. Yeah, so encourage folks to check out that landing page, give it a consider. And if you have any questions, obviously, Susan and I are available to chat right now for, what, 15 minutes of hazy end, Susan, something like this? Or I can stay around for 15
You could stay. I have to go, but very
Yeah.
excited. Yeah. Thanks, everybody. This was awesome.
Yeah, thank you all for coming. We
And
hope
you'll
you
get
got
you'll get a
flexible
follow-up
day.
email with all the links and the Miro and the invites and also just reach out to Steph and I, email us, LinkedIn us. We are always excited to meet new people and keep this practice alive. See you later. I'm gonna make you host, Steph.
Okie dokie.
Bye.
Bye. Yeah, and you want to hang out, ask more questions.